one new maid transforms a millionaire's little girl in just 30 days. Clara sat in her expansive bedroom, littered with pristine toys and untouched books, her fingers tracing the sleek edges of her tablet. She scrolled through flawless pictures of her friends celebrating birthdays with cake, laughter, and family hugs that seemed to drown out the emptiness echoing inside her. Every snapshot further highlighted the loneliness nestled within the walls of her father's mansion. While he built business empires from the ground up, Clara felt more like a project than a daughter, striving to meet expectations she never agreed to. She sighed, knowing that beneath the glimmering surface of Maplewood's wealth, precious moments like love seemed foreign still, tangible memories eternally out of reach. As the maid Rosa arrived, Clara barely cast a glance her way. Just a maid, one more face in a sea of service. Yet, as the days passed in the manor's rigid schedule, Clara noticed Rosa's sunbright smile and the way joy dripped from her stories, even as whispers trailed in her wake. The divide between them felt unshakable, Clara's heart halting at the thought of bridging the gap. Beneath manufactured perfection lay a fierce internal struggle. Did she dare shatter her father's image by forming a bond with someone seen as lesser? One rainy afternoon, trapped indoors with nowhere to hide from her swirling emotions, Clara huddled beside the window, where droplets cascaded like her longing. Rosa entered, carrying the scent of warm bread, lifting Clara's spirits for a fleeting moment. "What did you do for fun as a girl?" Clara asked out of quiet desperation, her voice timid. Rosa chuckled at the question, laughter bright and buoyant. "I climbed trees and chased the wind." Clara's heart leapt. A shared childhood moment, but in her world, there were no trees to climb, only paths paved with expectations. Suddenly, the four walls felt constricting, and the heaviness of her father's demands loomed larger. She wanted to scream, to let the facade crack, but fear rooted her feet in place. What if Rosa, vibrant as she seemed, was just another layer to her father's gilded walls? The thought twisted something deep inside her, forcing her to confront the truth of her own heart, a desire for authenticity in her carefully crafted world. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue, but as Clara sensed the warmth of camaraderie budding into something she craved, Robert's grip tightened. "You don't need to spend time with her," he snapped, fear sparking in his eyes. Confined to the shadows of social obligations and steel expectations, Clara felt suffocated. The storm inside her raged. Loving Rosa could shatter everything known and expected. Every smirk or judgment from her peers echoed in her mind, pricking her skin. Clara bit her lip, the weight of an impending decision playing heavy. Would she embrace the laughter shared with Rosa, or would she burrow deeper into an existence of luxury and loneliness? The air crackled with tension, eyes darting toward the door, knowing Robert could enter any moment. Confusion gripped her chest. This moment felt pivotal, charged. Would her frightened heart find the courage to defy her father, or would the desperation to hold on to what she knew drown the burgeoning happiness Rosa offered? Then, the door swung wide, and Robert stood there, a pillar of authority and disapproval, ready to enforce his will. Clara's pulse echoed in her ears, her thoughts frantic and racing. It was time for her to choose, but with each breath, the darkness of uncertainty loomed ever closer. Clara's heart raced as Robert's shadow filled the doorway. His presence was a storm cloud casting darkness over the thin thread of connection she had begun to spin with Rosa. She swallowed hard, her resolve wavering as the familiar specter of guilt and obligation slithered into her thoughts. She felt painfully aware of the chasm that existed between her desire for genuine connection and the chains of expectation binding her to a life she never chose. "What is going on here?" Robert's voice sliced through the air, and Clara's pulse quickened further. His penetrating gaze darted between them, assessing, calculating. She thought of the stories woven into Rosa's laughter, of the life she hinted at, carefree and abundant with simple joys. It was a stark contrast to the suffocating two-dimensional life of wealth Clara had grown accustomed to. I was just Clara hesitated, the words hanging in her throat. She couldn't say she was forming a friendship beyond the walls of privilege that would tread too close to rebellion. Instead, she found herself scrambling for safety, her words retreating. I was just asking Rosa about childhood games. Robert's expression hardened. You don't need to engage with the help, Clara. Focus on your studies, not on distractions. His dismissal felt like a tightening noose around her ambitions. Each sharp word cut deeper than previous reprimands. But beneath the sting, a flame flickered in her chest, a burgeoning resolve lifted from the pit of her confusion. The door swung back to its frame. Clara's breath released, as if she had been submerged underwater, gasping for air. She was emboldened not by Robert's authoritarian claim, but by the realization that her life could pivot in directions unknown, unfamiliar, yet enticing. The very thought of painting her existence with colors outside the monochrome life dictated by wealth and status invigorated her. Rosa, Clara said, her voice steadier than before, quaking with newfound determination, tell me more about those trees. Rosa's brow arched in surprise, delight sparking in her eyes. Oh, I climbed the tallest oak in our village. I would dream up adventures, imagining I could fly. Each tale spun by Rosa removed Clara further from her gilded cage, a powerful tether slowly transforming into a bond. With every story shared, Clara chipped away at the oppressive expectations shaping her identity. She felt a surge of purpose ignite. Perhaps curiosity itself could be her rebellion. Clara began to contemplate her own childhood wish to journey beyond the mansion's walls, to experience life as it was meant to be, full of imperfections and genuine laughter. All the things she had sacrificed at the altar of her father's ambitions rushed back to her like uninvited guests. Who was she if not an extension of her father's empire? Could she carve a path that honored both her spirit and the love she felt for Rosa? The tension in her heart remained, but the fear began to dissolve, replaced by determination. As she looked at Rosa, Clara realized there was more to this maid than mere service. She was a source of strength and authenticity, a muse sparking Clara's craving for self-discovery. Yet, as Clara embraced this new mindset, the roar of contradiction echoed inside her. Robert's ultimatum loomed, potent and unyielding. You need to meet deadlines, Clara. You know what is at stake. But she also heard Rosa's voice inside her, the laughter, the thrill of being more than what was dictated. The moment felt electric, charged with contradiction and possibility. Clara would have to confront Robert, face the suffocating tangled expectations head-on. The moment of truth arrived. What steps would she take to reclaim her identity? Would she finally let her voice be heard, or would the fear of her father's wrath draw her back into silence? The dance between freedom and constraint swirled ominously in her mind, urging her to decide what mattered most, loyalty or love. Clara's thoughts whirled as she confronted the walls closing in around her. Robert's words felt like the sharp edges of her reality, slicing through the tender fabric of her aspirations. Each day had blurred into the next under the weight of expectations. Yet in that moment, something within her stirred awake, a consciousness that longed to break free. Determined not to let Robert's looming presence dictate her life any longer, Clara resolved to carve out time for her own discovery. She needed to think strategically. A duel of wills was brewing, and she would not enter unarmed. The veil of privilege had always protected her, but it had also confined her spirit. She decided to invest in her hidden talents, the abilities she had pushed aside in her relentless pursuit of acceptance. Perhaps she could draw, paint, or write in a way that awakened excitement in her soul and opened her eyes to new experiences. That evening, Clara sneaked into her father's study, an act of rebellion masked as curiosity. Among layered stacks of financial reports and opulent decor lay her mother's old sketchbooks, worn but cherished. As she flipped through the pages, memories of her childhood flooded her mind. Afternoons spent scribbling with a mix of innocence and hope. Dusting off those memories felt like resurrecting a forgotten path. The following days saw Clara ruing the absence of a timetable. Every interaction was laced with tension. Moments with Rosa turned electric, filled with a blend of laughter and vulnerability. Clara snapped photos of the natural light spilling into the garden. Fresh perspectives of the world ignited her creativity, giving her the confidence to explore what lay beyond her sheltered upbringing. But she was still caught in Robert's controlled environment, where her blossoming was a threat to the existing hierarchy. More than a distraction, she whispered to herself, as she committed to reclaiming her voice. The thought terrified her, yet it fueled a burgeoning strength. Her decision to stand tall involved more than just artistic pursuits. It demanded confrontation not just with Robert, but with herself. She recognized that internal dialogue had built invisible prisons in her mind, dictating who she could be based on fear. One evening, Clara found herself facing Robert in the dining room, the tension palpable. It was the first time she felt poised, her chin slightly lifted as though she wore armor. "I need a chance to express myself, Father. I want to share ideas, to explore." His disapproval registered as an immediate chill. "Art, Clara, you must focus on tangible outcomes. You have responsibilities. It's time to act sensibly." He leaned forward, his voice a quiet menace, but Clara felt relentless. "Loyalty doesn't mean living shackled to a life that's not mine. Rosa taught me there's value in stories that don't involve money or status." The words spilled out before fear could grab them back. For a moment, Robert's eyes flickered with disbelief before anger settled in. "You need to grow up. This is a luxury you cannot afford." His dismissal was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet, Clara stood firm, her newfound voice ringing loudly in her ears. She realized she would no longer cower in corners meekly accepting what was laid before her. As days turned into weeks, Clara took her art seriously. She diversified her practice in secret, experimenting with watercolor and charcoal, sketching the nuances of her life with Rosa mirrored by nature unfiltered and alive. It became her sanctuary, a space to comprehend her split existence, unraveling the threads of identity into a more vivid tapestry than her gilded cage could offer. Yet awareness grew painfully clear. Robert wasn't her only adversary. Her own fears manifested into an impenetrable fog of doubt. Would proficiency in her artistry be enough to break her free? She feared the day the rift between her and her father would reach a climax, a confrontation that could jeopardize everything. With her clandestine endeavors fueling a burgeoning self, she now faced the question most daunting of all. Could she confront the legacy of wealth and status her father had built, or would she cradle her dreams in silence? Step by agonizing step, she prepared for the meeting that would determine her fate. The question loomed: would her newfound strength be enough to chart a new course, or would it succumb to familial allegiance? The unease between her evolving identity and the looming confrontation with her father fostered an electric tension. The inevitable reckoning drew nearer. Clara's heart raced as she entered the small, dimly lit studio tucked away in the corner of the family estate. The smell of paint and wood dust mingled in the air, and the chaotic arrangement of her art supplies felt like a reflection of her own tumultuous emotions. Each brush stroke on the canvas was a small rebellion, a defiance against the life predetermined for her. She inhaled deeply, determined to immerse herself in the creative chaos that had become her sanctuary. It was during these private moments that she began to challenge not just Robert's vision for her, but her own expectations. Doubt still gnawed at her, whispering that art was not a viable path. Each time she completed a piece, her critical inner voice would bark, "What will Robert think? What does this achieve?" But every brushstroke also nudged her further into the exhilarating territory of self-discovery. During one rainy afternoon, as raindrops pattered against the studio windows, Clara sat in silence, gazing at her latest painting. It was an explosion of color that captured the wild beauty of the garden, a wildness she had yearned to express but had long stifled. The colors gleamed with emotions she had spent her life containing. "This," she murmured, a sense of clarity washing over her. "This is what freedom feels like." But freedom was fragile, and Clara grappled with its dual implications. She needed to be bold in her artistic journey, yet the weight of familial loyalty tugged at her. That evening, as she arrived for dinner with Robert, she resolved to find a balance. The idea of discussing her art entangled itself with images of gendered expectations, success defined by her father's standards versus her own burgeoning vision. The tension was palpable as they sat at their long dining table, laden with food and the stench of unspoken grievances. "Have you considered your future, Clara?" Robert queried coldly, barely looking up from his plate. His voice was laden with an authority that felt suffocating. "I'm considering what I want it to be," she replied, testing the waters, her heart thumping. His fork paused mid-air, and he finally met her gaze, irritation flaring in his eyes. "You have obligations to fulfill. Your dreams should not interfere with the family legacy." Clara's resolve hardened. "I want to explore art, Father. Something intrinsically about that resonates with me. It's not an interference, it's my voice." Her statement hung in the air, laden with implications. The tension morphed into a wrestling match between her burgeoning individuality and Robert's unyielding expectations. Was this the confrontation she feared? The unease within her swelled as she awaited his response. "Art is a hobby, nothing more. You don't have time to indulge in fantasies," he stated, his tone final, leaving no room for negotiation. Clara clenched her hands beneath the table. Her artistry fought back against Robert's harsh dismissal. But what if she began, her voice timid but insistent? What if that hobby can evolve? What if it can lead to something deeper than our family's traditions? "I need you to trust my instincts." The silence between them crackled with undisclosed emotions. For the first time, Clara had unwrapped her fears and confronted them, but Robert's face twisted into an expression she couldn't decipher. Was it annoyance or concern? As he opened his mouth to respond, a shiver of anticipation coursed through her. This was a critical moment. Could she extend the cracks in their relationship to reveal her true self? With bated breath, Clara held onto the tension, desperate to know if her defenses would crumble or if she would finally embrace the artist within her. "The time has come to face the truth," she thought, steeling herself for whatever his response might be. Would she break free, or would she remain ensnared in the family's expectations? The path forward lay before her, uncertain yet exhilarating, and Clara braced herself for the inevitable fallout. The air was thick with silence as Clara and Robert faced each other across the dining table. Clara's heart thudded in her chest, each pulse echoing the stakes of the moment. She had taken a step into unfamiliar territory, but retreating felt like a betrayal of herself. Robert finally set down his fork, his eyes narrowing. "Do you truly believe you can make a life from this obsession?" The disdain dripped from his words like acid, seeking to corrode her newfound resolve. Clara's fingers twitched on her lap, caught in the struggle between her burning desire to express herself and the need to fulfill his vision of duty. Taking a breath, she leaned forward. "It's not just a hobby. I have ideas, feelings, stories to tell. I want to create something that matters, something that reflects who I am." The words spilled out before she could second-guess them, pouring forth like paint from a tube. Robert's expression only hardened. "And what about the family? What about the responsibilities you have to uphold our name?" Clara felt her chest tighten. The confrontation ignited something deep within her, a mix of defiance and fear. "Is my life simply to be a continuation of your legacy? What about my choices?" A moment of stillness enveloped them. Robert's face clouded, the lines around his mouth tightening. She had crossed a line, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. Beneath the stern facade, the father she had always known flickered into view, vulnerable, perhaps even scared. "I'm not trying to abandon our family," she pressed on, emboldened by the small victory of his hesitation. "But I can't ignore this part of me any longer. I refuse to live in a box built from your expectations." She could feel the walls of that box start to crack, and this awareness sent a rush of excitement coursing through her. "You think this is easy? You think just because you express yourself, everything else falls away?" Robert challenged, his voice laced with bitterness. Clara saw a path ahead, a fragile opportunity to step beyond the familial obligations that had long defined her. "I don't expect it to be easy, but taking the leap is worth it. This is about who I am." As her resolve crystallized, the chaos of her emotions transformed into clarity. The confrontation had forced her to confront her deepest fears, the fear of failure, the fear of disappointing Robert, and perhaps the most insidious fear of forgetting who she truly was. The desire to create had awakened a strength within her that she didn't know existed. Each stroke on the canvas was becoming a statement of purpose, a proclamation of her identity that could no longer be suppressed. Robert's face paled for a moment, the color draining as he processed her declaration. This was not merely a disagreement. It was a challenge to the very foundation of their relationship. With their glances locked, Clara held on to a hope that perhaps he could understand, even if only a little, how vital it was for her to carve a space for her authentic self. As Clara stepped back from the table, a mixture of pride and fear surged within her. She carried the weight of unresolved tensions and untold stories. Yet, as she retreated to her studio, the quiet urgency of creation pulled her in like a magnetic force. The canvas awaited her, eager to absorb the chaos of her heart and mind, but the next morning would arrive with its own set of challenges. Clara knew she needed to confront her fears head-on, not just with Robert, but confronting herself, her doubts, her limits, and the external judgments that loomed over her aspirations. The pathway which had seemingly opened now felt dense with uncertainty and demands. Could she truly ignite her creative spirit without leaving everything else behind? As she approached her canvas, brush in hand, Clara braced herself for a daunting revelation, poised to redefine her relationship not just with her art, but with her entire world. And deep down, a question echoed within her: would she dare to show the world her art? With a shuddering breath, she prepared for the leap into uncharted territory. The journey ahead was fraught with peril, but somewhere in the depths, she felt a whisper urging her on. Would she embrace the artist within, or would fear once again shackle her to her past? Clara's fingers hovered above the canvas, her breath catching with anticipation. The morning light streamed through the window, illuminating the blank expanse before her, a world of possibility, waiting to be filled. As she absorbed the silence, her heart raced with the weight of her newfound resolve. The confrontation with Robert had awakened something raw and potent inside her, stirring her desire to shed the expectations handed to her like a cloak she never asked for. She dipped her brush into a palette of colors, letting her instincts guide her as she began to apply strokes, first tentative, then bolder. Each brushstroke became a dance, a clash of emotions that spilled out onto the canvas. Fear, anger, hope, and raw determination intertwined, creating a tapestry of expression she had never dared to explore. As Clara painted, she realized how deeply her art was interwoven with her identity. Every hue carried a secret, a story she felt compelled to tell. The canvas was not just a surface, it was a reflective pool of her soul, revealing parts of herself that had long remained hidden. This was liberation, a reclaiming of her voice, and she began to understand that the journey of self-expression was equally a journey of self-acceptance. But just as her confidence surged, so did the gnawing doubts that crept in. Would her art resonate with others? Would she be able to push beyond the boundaries of her comfort zone? The expectations of her family felt like shadows lurking just outside her studio, threatening to drag her back into a past that she fought so desperately to escape. Each time she dipped her brush, she felt the weight of their scrutiny, her father's disapproval, her mother's silent acceptance. Clara stepped back from the canvas, allowing herself to breathe. She posed a question to the air that hung heavy with paint fumes. What would it take to embrace her truth fully? Leaning against the wall, she replayed her father's words in her mind. Every accusation of obsession echoed the fears that spiraled within her: fear of being seen as frivolous, irresponsible. The thought made her stomach churn, but it also ignited a spark. What if she could break free? With renewed determination, she planned her next move. If she wanted to showcase her art, she needed to gather courage not just to create, but to display her inner world to the people who had always known her as their obedient daughter. She envisioned hosting an open studio, a gathering where friends and family could walk through the threshold of her creative sanctuary and witness her transformation. But would she have the strength to face them? What if their judgment drowned out her voice? Clara knew these questions rattled an anxious chord deep within her, but illuminating that darkness could be her greatest masterpiece. She picked up the brush again. Each stroke grew more assertive, fueled by the fervor of her aspirations. This was more than art. It was her battle cry, a visual declaration of her intention to claim her space within the world. But as much as she pushed forward, Clara's apprehensions loomed larger. She felt the duality of those closely woven fears and desires. This effort was still steeped in uncertainty. Was she truly ready to unveil her spirit to the people she once sought approval from? That thought hung in the air as she stepped away, her heart thudding loudly in her ears. One thing became clear. She would have to strike a balance between her passion and the obligations that tethered her to the past. The canvas held no answers, but it demanded her resolve. Clara exhaled sharply. She lacked a plan for how to face Robert, how to navigate the conversation that would follow her announcement. After all, this was her father she was up against, not just a gatekeeper of familial norms, but a voice of authority with the power to uplift or dismantle her. The stakes had never felt so high, and yet Clara reluctantly felt exhilarated by the prospect. Could she genuinely challenge the gravitational pull of her past? The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. Creative development was tied inexorably to personal growth. Settling back in front of her canvas, she continued to paint with fervor, driven by a singular purpose. Emergence beckoned, thrilling and terrifying. Then, with every stroke, the lingering question returned. Could she truly share her art and face the fallout? The moment of truth loomed nearer, and Clara was teetering on the edge, standing poised to leap into vulnerability and transformation. Could she silence the doubts and embrace the artist within? She was about to find out. The silence of her studio was both a sanctuary and a prison. Clara's heart raced as she confronted the canvas again, wrestling with the implications of her artistic journey. The open studio event loomed like a specter on the horizon, a light illuminating the path she needed to tread, but also casting shadows of doubt over her intentions. Clara recalled her mother's encouraging smile, but her father's disapproving frown overshadowed those sunny thoughts. She wrestled with the convoluted expectations and her burning desire to forge a new identity. Every stroke of paint elicited emotions she had long buried: jealousy, fear, longing, and an overwhelming need to be seen. Should she turn the gallery into a battlefield or a sanctuary? The uncertainty began to transform into clarity. She needed a plan. As she wrapped up her last strokes of color, she drew a fresh sheet of paper toward her. This would be her strategy. She scribbled down the logistics of the open studio in jagged notes: date, time, guest list. But within that list emerged the daunting specter of conversation. She needed to practice. Could she present her vision to her father without crumbling under his judgments? Clara imagined sitting across from him, words lodged in her throat. Her thoughts tangled like the colors on her palette, creating a chaotic mix that left her reeling. "Okay, Clara," she murmured to herself, pushing her doubts aside. "Let us rehearse." Holding an imaginary conversation in her mind, she outlined the arguments she wanted to present. "Dad, I need you to understand that this is not just a hobby for me," she imagined saying. "This is my life. I want to create, to explore, and to be true to who I am." Yet, even as she vocalized her thoughts, the familiar waves of doubt returned. What if he dismissed her dreams as whims? What if he didn't see the evolution she'd fought for? Clara forced herself to breathe deeply, focusing on the internal shift she had experienced. This wasn't just about her father's acceptance. It was about her own. With new determination, she revisited her canvas, layering colors with renewed conviction. The painting was a metaphor for her journey, a blend of chaos and beauty, capturing her essence. Every stroke echoed her internal struggle, yet harmonized with the emotions she longed to express freely. As the hours slipped by, Clara completed her piece, standing back to survey what had emerged. She marveled at the depth of the emotion conveyed, a visceral representation of resilience and growth. Her heart swelled with pride, yet anxiety clawed at her resolve as she turned away from the finished work, challenging the enormity of what lay ahead. Days passed with frantic preparations for the open studio. She invited friends while simultaneously bracing herself against her family's probable judgment. The closer the date approached, the more Clara felt the weight of her dual existence, an aspiring artist torn between familial expectations and her quest for authenticity. That morning marked her emotional crescendo. Staring at the finished painting, the room vibrated with energy that seemed to thrum in her veins. Clara realized the stakes were even higher than she'd expected. The canvas now embodied not just her artistic vision, but her longing for acceptance, not just from her family, but also from herself. She could either cling to the past or embrace the fear, letting it propel her forward. As she prepared for the event, it became undeniable this wasn't merely an exhibition of her art. It was a reckoning of her identity. Could she navigate that pivotal conversation with her father, laying bare her soul in front of those whose approval she once desperately sought? The day morphed into a reality that Clara had been both waiting for and dreading. With each tick of the clock, she felt the intensity build around her, thickening the air as if to challenge her resolve. Today was the culmination of her transformation, a test of the boundaries she was ready to redefine. Standing there, on the precipice, the doorbell rang. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Would she choose to open the door and face her fears, or retreat into her safe haven of uncertainty? With trembling hands, she reached for the door. This wasn't just about art. This was a leap into the unknown. Clara hesitated for just a moment, her fingers brushing against the cool metal of the doorknob. Each tick of the clock seemed to echo in her mind, warning her that time was running out. What awaited her on the other side of that door? A crowd of expectant faces, or her father's disillusioned gaze? She couldn't turn back now. That would mean yielding to fear, yet again. With a resolute breath, she opened the door and stepped into the illuminated chaos that flooded her studio. Friends adorned the space like a constellation she had carefully crafted, each one a part of her journey, each spark a reminder of her commitment to authenticity. "Clara, this is amazing." A voice erupted from the crowd, drawing her gaze towards a host of familiar faces. Her heart raced, a mixture of excitement and impending dread coiling in her stomach. The painting, her soul laid bare on canvas, seemed to echo the truth she'd long buried. As guests chatted amongst themselves, Clara tried to focus on the unfolding moments around her. Excitement swirled in the air, laughter intermingling with laughter, but all Clara could hear were the murmurs of her self-doubt. What if they didn't understand? What if her father scoffed at her work? In a bid to combat her spiraling thoughts, she forced herself to mingle. She approached Maya, an old friend who had always supported her artistic endeavors. "What do you think?" Clara asked, her voice almost a whisper as she gestured toward her painting. Maya stepped closer, eyes narrowing as she took in the bold strokes and rich colors. Clara watched, her chest tightening with anticipation, as Maya took a step back, seemingly lost in the depth of the piece. "It's raw, Clara. I see you in this. It's beautiful," she finally said, a genuine smile breaking through. Clara's heart swelled at the validation, a flicker of hope igniting the embers of her confidence. But just as swiftly, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall, and her pulse quickened. She steeled herself as her father entered the room. The laughter dimmed, and an invisible thread of tension pulled tighter around Clara. In that suffocating moment, she knew she had a decision to make. Would she let his presence stifle her, or could she push through? Her heart raced as she caught his disapproving glance riveted on the painting. The room seemed to still as he approached her. "Clara," he began, a deep breath escaping his lips. "Do you really believe this represents you?" His voice held an edge that felt both bitter and heavy. The question hung in the air, daring her to justify her identity before him. "I do," she managed, each word a small rebellion against years of feeling unheard. "This isn't just paint on a canvas. It's my journey. It's my life." As doubt flickered across his features, Clara felt the familiar stitch of fear unwinding within her. Had she finally begun to embrace her own truth, regardless of his approval? The atmosphere crackled with uncertainty, and for the first time, she didn't look to the ground, didn't shy away. She held his gaze, breathing in the magnitude of her conviction. "What you see," she pressed on, her voice growing steadier, "is a reflection of everything I've been through. It's chaos, yes, but it's also a growth that you haven't recognized." The room shifted around them, friends absorbing the intensity of the moment as if the very air had thickened with pressure. Clara's heart thundered, equally exhilarated and terrified by what was unfolding. Was this the confrontation she had feared, or was it the path toward her liberation? She felt exposed, yes, but she also felt clarity. What was this moment preparing her for? With her father quiet now, uncertainty began to stir within her again. She sensed a change, a potential willingness for understanding. The fear had shifted into something more potent, a question of acceptance not just from him, but from herself. As Clara engaged with each passing moment, ready to navigate the nuances of this conversation, she realized it was not merely about her painting anymore. It was about identity. And just as she had feared, navigating through her father's judgment felt like an uncharted journey that a new surge of energy pulsed through her. But what awaited her next would be iteratively harder than she anticipated. What if this newfound confidence would bring forward new challenges she had yet to face? Resolved to explore this profound shift, Clara wondered, could she face the truth buried deep within, emerging even bolder? Clara sensed the weight of her father's silence, a void that gnawed at the edges of her newfound courage. She had drawn a line in the sand, revealing her vulnerability to the world, yet now she stood as a monument of uncertainty before him. There was an ember of hope flickering inside her, yet its brightness was overshadowed by doubt. What if this confrontation didn't lead to reconciliation, but further estrangement? Her father's face bore a mask of contemplation. It was rare for him to linger in silence, and that made the moment feel electric. She wondered what thoughts were colliding in his mind. Did he see her work as chaos, or could he grasp the intricate narratives embedded in each brushstroke? "Your mother would have understood," he finally said, the words thick with regret. The mention of her mother sent a tremor through Clara. It was as if he had reached into the depths of her memory, pulling out a ghost that had never truly left. "Maybe I just don't understand this world you're diving into." The raw honesty in his admission stung, but also intrigued Clara. Was this a crack in the armor of his disapproval? "Then let us talk about it," she suggested, her voice resonating with an unexpected steadiness. "I want you to understand. This journey isn't just for me. It's a way for both of us to reconcile what we lost." For a fleeting moment, his eyes softened. There was a flicker of something curiosity, perhaps, and with it came a sense of responsibility for Clara. She was determined to illuminate the shadows of misunderstanding with her truth, not just for herself but for him. Their exchange shifted, sparking a connection that had long been dormant. Each layer of her painting seemed to unravel more of her father's heartache. As Clara recounted her artistic journey, the sacrifices, the nights spent wrestling with self-doubt, he began to lean in closer, a man willing to listen. "Art has always scared me," he admitted. "It feels so uncertain, unlike everything else I've known." Clara's heart beat uncomfortably in her chest. This was the moment she needed a chance to bridge their worlds. Well, maybe that's what makes it powerful. It's not about comfort, it's about raw honesty. It's revealing parts of yourself that might be difficult, she said, a spark of challenge igniting her words. He sighed deeply, resting his gaze on the colorful chaos before them. "And you think it's worth it? This uncertainty and risk?" "Yes, because that's where growth lies. Every piece tells a story, but it's the unveiling that matters." Clara's conviction resonated in the air between them, and she saw him wrestle with the notion of accepting a world beyond his meticulous order. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was willing to step into the realm of chaos with her. Yet, just as a semblance of understanding emerged, she noted the simmering tension beneath the surface. It was one thing to articulate her perspective, but would that understanding translate into acceptance? Clara's hands trembled against her sides, reflecting the inner tempest stirring within. "I want to understand you, but what if that requires more than mere acceptance?" he asked, his voice taking on a layered weight. "What am I meant to do when you're chasing dreams I can't fathom?" His words hung like a pendulum, teetering between anxiety and hope. It was a moment pregnant with questions that pushed at the boundaries of Clara's convictions. "I don't know," she admitted, taking a leap of faith. "But perhaps we can discover that together." His brow furrowed in contemplation, a visible tension threading through his posture. Illumination danced through Clara as she realized the road ahead remained fraught with complexities. She had managed to articulate her truth, but what she really faced was not just a battle for understanding. It was a quest for mutual acceptance amidst irreconcilable differences. Clara caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of her painting, a vibrant, chaotic figure rooted in her truth. But the question loomed heavier than any canvas. Was she ready to confront the full spectrum of her journey, unveiling not only herself but also the hidden parts of her father? With the weight of their shared history heavy on her chest, she breathed resolutely, ready to navigate the unknown depths. And as the voices of their friends faded into background noise, a realization dawned: this conversation was just the beginning. The impending dialogue held the potential to unlock long-buried truths for both of them. What lay ahead was an exploration of wounds too deep to ignore, and Clara wondered if she could remain anchored in her truth as she peeled back the layers of their fractured relationship. The moment of reckoning beckoned, and she felt unprepared for the revelations that awaited. Would she emerge whole, or would the truth fracture her resolve? Clara's art exhibition had ignited a spark deep within her, revealing not just her talent, but her courage to confront the life she had been given and the one she truly wanted. As she stood across from Robert, she felt the weight of both their histories heavy in the air, but a steely resolve surged through her veins. "Dad, I want to understand you, and I want you to understand me. This isn't just a moment, it's my life. It's everything I've hidden, everything I've denied," she began, her voice unwavering. Each word emerged like the strokes on her canvas, deliberate and imbued with the essence of her journey. Robert watched her, his eyes narrowing slightly as though assessing the newly visible Clara. He shifted, emotions flickering across his face, a reflection of unease, curiosity, and perhaps a bedded resolution. It was a stark contrast to the man who had always imposed his will, and Clara felt a swell of hope mixed with anxiety inching through her. "Life is not simple, Clara. There are responsibilities, commitments," he countered, but she could hear the subtle uncertainty in his tone. "Life isn't simple if you keep trying to control everything." Clara's voice took on a fiercer edge, her passion awakening something deep in her father. "Art is uncertain, yes, but it's exhilarating too. Each piece is a story. It tells the journey, our journeys. If I can embrace that, can't you at least try?" For the first time, she saw the cracks in Robert's facade widen, revealing the vulnerability he had kept hidden. "You think I don't want you to create? You think I don't care?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly with an emotion uncharacteristic of him. "No, it's not about that, Dad. It's about who I am underneath all your expectations. I'm not just your daughter. I have dreams and desires. I need you to see me," Clara replied. The truth of her words catalyzing something between them. As silence enveloped them, the fabric of their relationship began to mend, thread by thread, through the raw honesty of the moment. Clara felt the tension dissipate, replaced by a fragile connection that had been absent in their previous encounters. Robert took a moment, eyes shifting to her painting, absorbing the chaos of colors that represented so much more than just art. Recognizing her journey struck a deeper chord within him, perhaps the realization that he had been building walls that kept both of them imprisoned in isolation. "Your mother," he hesitated, "she would have loved this." The acknowledgement hung in the air, palpable and poignant. Clara's breath quickened. Was this the entry point for their hearts to reconnect? "This is what she wanted to see in you, a life fully lived, an expression of your truth," he continued, his voice softer, layered with an unexpected sincerity. This opening revealed a sense of vulnerability that Clara craved. Perhaps it was the dawning realization that passion and familial duty could coexist, leading to their reconciliation. "I never wanted you to abandon our legacy. I always thought fulfilling my dreams meant fulfilling yours," Clara said. "But you taught me that success isn't just measured by wealth, it's also shaped through authenticity." Slowly, Robert let a breath escape, the intensity of the moment settling around them like a soft cocoon. "Maybe I restricted you because I was afraid. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of the unknown." His honesty illuminated a fragment of his struggle, changing the colors of their shared narrative. Clara reached out, yearning for connection. "Then let us explore it together." Empowered by newfound understanding, Clara felt different, not merely a reflection of Robert's ambitions, but a fully realized individual in her own right. The transformation wasn't just in her art, but within her own will to face uncertainty. She would no longer be a passive participant in her life. She was the artist, the creator of her destiny. In that moment, Clara proved to herself that she was capable of embodying both duty and desire, an accomplishment that was deeply gratifying. She was becoming not just an artist, but an individual, grounded in authenticity, validated by her own voice and choice. Her father's acceptance remained uncertain, but amidst the art around them was a blossoming trust, a bridge toward reconciliation and new beginnings. Their conversation unfolded into plans for Clara to continue her art, perhaps even collaborating with Robert to leverage the family legacy in ways that supported her passion. The uncertainty that had filled her soul now pulsed with promise of vibrant potential stretching ahead of her with every brushstroke. As the event came to a close, Clara stepped back from her work and took a deep breath, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. She had navigated through layers of doubt, familial expectations, and creative fear, and though the road ahead would be riddled with challenges, she stood robust and confident, ready to embrace the artistic journey before her. Emotions are messy, Clara reminded herself, but that's where life thrives. Armed with the capacity to create not just through art, but through connections and self-acceptance, she was resolute. Whatever her future held, colors of joy, crunch of uncertainty, she would strive to create her own masterpiece. And with that realization, Clara felt a wave of triumph wash over her, signaling the beginning of a life painted with authenticity, passion, and unapologetic truth. Now, it's your turn to seize the moment. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for amazing narratives like Clara's. Comment your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible story of overcoming challenges.